My name is Edwin L Vardiman, Sr., and I was born in Louisville, Kentucky on November the 19th, 1927, at the Kentucky Baptist Hospital. I was raised there as a young child and was very happy to be a Kentuckian and have been all my life. The greatest influence in my life regarding Freemasonry was my father and also my grandfather, who were both members of the fraternity. My father was a Blue Lodge Mason. He never advanced any further, as he was a member during the height of the Depression when money was very tight. My grandfather did belong to the York Rite as well, and he progressed as far as the York Rite in his Masonic affiliations. I have to confess that my father was not all that active. He was very, very faithful in getting his dues paid during the Depression years, which I was really now even amazed that he could do. But he managed somehow to do it, maybe with some help from the lodge, I'm not really sure. But my grandfather was more active because he was a member of the York Rite and did a lot of activity, including my mother used to talk about how he and my grandmother would take her to lodge activities such as dinners and that sort of thing. And she had great and positive memories of the activities that they used to be involved in. Well, that was when they lived in Louisville. My grandfather had a farm in Bullitt County, which he had bought for his retirement. And we lived out there for a while during the Depression. And so it was the inconvenience of the location plus the financial straits that we were in that prevented more activities in the lodge, I'm sure. And as a child was raised with the Masonic Home Journal, which came to our house every month. And so I remember asking my mother, what is this thing called Masons? What is this all about? And she was very encouraging to me and very helpful in explaining the fraternity. And it sounded like something I would like, and I was always very interested in it. And when the time came when I grew older, I followed up on that and then became a member of the Masonic Order. I joined the fraternity in March of 1969 in Crescent Hill Lodge in Louisville, Kentucky, at the lodge there, and I became active. I was one of, as I recall, 4 members that joined at the time that I did. And it was interesting to see the reaction of some of the other fellows and my own reaction, because to me it was all new, but I was so really fascinated by the historical part of the lodge ritual and how it had grown up with ancient words that I was not familiar with, and the symbolism that was attached to the various parts of the ritual. That gave me a lot of positive feeling. I also felt a lot of negative feelings in that my father and my grandfather could not be there to witness my going into the lodge. After I became a Mason, I was most interested in the makeup of the organization. It was very fascinating to me, all the different bodies that are a part of or attendant to the main Blue Lodge. And I became active in helping with the Order of the Rainbow Girls. And I helped with that, and particularly with their checking their financial reports and their audits. That went on for a period of years that I was involved with the lodge in Louisville. I was also interested in helping with the lodge in their activities such as yard sales and that sort of thing. I wanted to be an active member, and they did realize that I desired to have an active part, and so I became a lower officer in the line. And I was involved with that at the time of my job transfer, which then I started over again in Covington Lodge, and later became the master of the lodge in the 1990s. The change in my residence was occasioned by the fact that I was unhappy with my position with the Army Corps of Engineers in Louisville. I was very happy there as a lawyer working for the Army Corps of Engineers, and wound up having a career of over 30 years with them. But I realized that I was not going to get a promotion in the office because the man that I was behind in seniority was not in any way ready to retire. So it was either transfer or be faithful to where I was. So I decided to make a move. My wife was in agreement, as she usually was. She agreed that we would move, and an opening came here in northern Kentucky in the Ohio River Division office in Cincinnati. So I put in for it and secured that position. I became an assistant division counsel for the Ohio River Division in Cincinnati, and worked in that position until I retired in 1992. After I moved to northern Kentucky, I had to make the decision about leaving my mother lodge, Crescent Hill Lodge in Louisville, to come up here and to be a part of a lodge in this area. I was very fortunate to know a couple of people in my church that were a member of Covington Lodge 109, and they invited me to be a visitor and then later to consider becoming a member of the lodge. I was very happy to do so because the lodge was active and had enough people to do the work and make some good decisions about their activities and about other things that were available for the family and that sort of thing. That was the way it was when I first joined. As a result of the attrition of years, it's been found necessary to be merged with other lodges, and it's now known as Gateway Number 109. The lodge is still active, and I'm glad to say it seems to be doing well with new members and new blood coming in. I still miss the original lodge, but the grim hand of death has removed many of the members that I've so admired, and the people that were members of my church as well as members of the lodge have been removed from me, so I have to accept things as they are, and I'm very happy to say the lodge is doing well. I was raised on the farm that belonged to my grandfather, and my father This farm that my grandfather had was about 100 acres in Bullitt County, Kentucky, which is just south of Louisville. It is now all developed in subdivisions for Louisville, but at that time it was rural. And my dad then bought 60 acres that adjoined my grandfather's farm, so they had 160 acres altogether. It made a sizable piece of land. But I was raised there as a child, and it was a very valuable experience. Number one, I got to know the land. I got to appreciate the land, and I got to appreciate the animals that were on the farm, and as well as a country school. I started at a country school that had 2 rooms. Grades 1 through 4 in one room, 4 through 8 in another room. And that was a different experience than anything I encountered later in life when my family returned to Louisville and I went to the city schools. I'm a graduate of Louisville Male High School, and I'm very grateful to say I'm a member of the Hall of Fame there. For whatever reason, my wife gave a theory that they ran out of football stars to honor, so they gave me some, made me a member of the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to comment on how valid that may be, but anyway, that was her theory. Anyway, I then went to the University of Louisville. I got my bachelor's degree there, and then my law degree, that followed up with that. Now, I must admit that my time in the university was helped tremendously by the GI Bill. I'm a veteran of the Air Force. I was taken in back at the end of World War II when all the heavy fighting was over, and I went primarily to school. I was a weatherman in the Air Weather Service in the Air Force. So I was never involved in any combat or anything like that. But I went to school following World War II, and then during the Korean War, I was recalled for 2 years of active duty in the Air Force, which I served at the air base near Fort Benning, Georgia. So that was how I got through law school, was with the help of the GI Bill. And since then, I've worked for the insurance company for a couple of years, met my wife-to-be there, and I always said that was the best thing I ever found in the insurance field. But then I became an employee of the Corps of Engineers, so I worked for the Army the rest of my career. Well, the main responsibility of the Army Corps of Engineers at this time is with the rivers, navigation, and water resources. And my duties as a lawyer for the Army Corps of Engineers was any accidents that happened in or on the navigable waters of the Ohio, primarily in this case, of my jurisdiction, around anything, big accidents around the locks and dams, or anything that was influenced by the Corps of Engineers at their flood control lakes, flood walls, whatever that involved the navigation on the Ohio River. However, I also had duties as a regular lawyer. If one of the employees had an accident or automobile accident with a Corps vehicle, I would get involved in that also. So it was always a mixture of duties. I was always very happy to get involved. Even some of the things were very complicated. It was always a very interesting thing. One thing I did not do a lot of was legal work in the courtrooms. That was reserved for the U.S. attorneys who handled the trials, but it would be my duty to get everything ready for the trial, including lining up witnesses and getting statements from everyone involved and such. One of the more interesting incidences that I was involved in while I was working for the Corps of Engineers was the blizzards and terrible weather involving the blizzard in 1997, which really impacted severely on the Ohio River, including ice that formed solidly here at Cincinnati. People were walking back and forth across the river on the ice floes, and down around Markland Dam, which is halfway between Louisville and Cincinnati. Markland Dam is one of the main locks and dams on the Ohio River in traffic. It was a very great impact when the ice came and just stopped navigation entirely, including the big ice flows that came down the river succeeded in sinking the Claire Beatty, which was a towboat owned by Captain John Beatty, who had a salvage operation on the Ohio River based near Markland Dam. So one of the result of all of that was the navigation completely stopped on the river. And the Corps was beyond its means, really, of getting things going again until after the things started melting. And then they restored navigation as soon as they could. It became a very personal thing to me because in the attempts to restore navigation, the Corps set off several charges of dynamite around the dam to break up the ice. And this resulted in all the landowners that had houses on beside the river, on or near the river, and they would go out and look at their foundations of their buildings to see if the dynamite had caused any cracks. Well, we got several claims from the adjoining landowners, and it was my job, along with an expert engineer that I took with me, to inspect to see if there was any validity to these claims. And it was really a very interesting time because of the multitude of work and the different challenges, legal challenges that I had in trying to resolve all of this, which, by the way, the last of those claims were settled and disposed of just prior to my retirement in 1992. When I became a member of the William O. Ware Lodge of Research, it was customary that any member who wanted to have a part in the lodge activities could write a paper. And that was something I like to do. I like to investigate some topic I didn't know anything about and then share it with the members in the lodge. I wrote several papers that I understand have been made a part of the website that are available to read. And while they're not as complete or maybe as fancy as I would have liked them to be upon rereading them, they are still filled with a lot of facts that I was interested in, and including members of the lodge and people who had influenced the lodge that had occurred as an inspiration to me. I was master of the Lodge of Research. I really didn't expect this to come because I had not been a master of a Blue Lodge, but the brethren in the lodge decided they wanted me to be master, so I figured I would do that as somewhat of as a repayment for the pleasure that I had gotten out of the lodge and having a part in the research. So at that time, the lodge was very active in trying to, number one, establish itself. It was new. The concept was somewhat new, and the people who were very active in the lodge and did their part as well, and making the meetings interesting and informative. Jimmy Forrest was one I remember. He was something of an institution in the local lodge at that time. And Dick Van Bergen, he was another one that I very much admired and was very active in the lodge. The various members would serve as the secretary and trying to keep up with the membership. At that time, you had to be, as now, a member of a Blue Lodge, active Blue Lodge, and then you would become a member of the Lodge of Research. So it was primarily devoted locally in membership, and also with the papers. They would usually try to include something having to do with Masonry, either its history or its philosophy or some outstanding member. Various topics were chosen, and various very interesting papers were delivered at that time, because it would usually run not every month, but every several months we would have a paper and a good discussion. So that was very interesting to me. As a child, my father explained to me in response to my question about Freemasonry, it's something that has always stuck with me. He said, and this is nothing original with him, I'm sure, that the purpose of Freemasonry is to take good men and make them better. And I thought about that in my years of growing up, and thought, how can I be a better person? And that was a challenge I knew that came through the lodge. It was something that challenged me personally, to be a better person than what I would be otherwise. And I think I was successful in retaining that lesson and making it a sort of a motto in my life. Masonry is certainly challenging. I found that to be a fact throughout my many years in the fraternity. But I think that one thing that every member should keep in mind is that activity in the lodge and feeling a part of it is very important. You can be a card-carrying member, which is good. It helps the purposes of the lodge and will help you if you read the materials and so on. But to have personal improvement, I think it's good to be a member of this group of fellow Masons who are going to encourage you, give you examples to live by, and to show how you feel about life and about what means and makes life important to you. Some people's life is not really that challenging, but if you have the Masonic Lodge, you're going to find something that will make it mean more to you. After my retirement from the Army Corps of Engineers, I was sort of at loose ends. I didn't have any particular hobbies that I spent a lot of time with. I like to read, and of course sprinkled in with a little TV and that sort of thing, but I didn't have a real purpose to my life. And my wife was aware of this, and she was helpful in her way. But after a period of about 6 weeks that I enjoyed doing nothing, absolutely nothing, after my retirement, I was sitting at the breakfast table one morning reading my paper, and a call came from the Covington Scottish Rite. And it was Fred Bryant, who was the personal representative at the Valley of Covington at that time. And he said, we need some help. Our longtime secretary has retired or quit without any notice, and he got mad and over a minor item and stomped out. So could you come down and help us? So I said, well, of course, I'll be glad to help you. I had nothing else going on at the time. He said, we estimate you'll be here 6 weeks. I said, oh, that's great. So I went down and found out what was going on, and sure enough, the secretary had retired or left in unusual circumstances, as he did not give his notice. And so no preparations had been made for a change. And I didn't even have any information on where the bank accounts were. I didn't know even where they had the bank account. But I was filling in as secretary of the Valley. Well, the 6 weeks came and went, and I became more involved with what was going on and with the people that were regular there and the various duties that were involved. And so it was extended. My time was extended. It kept being extended. So as a result, I was involved there for 21 years before I officially retired. And it was really a challenge, and it was very satisfying as well. I got to know so many wonderful people, worked with so many nice people, never had any problems that caused any difficulties with personalities or anything like that. And I worked closely with John Moyers, whom I admired greatly. He was the personal representative in the state. And I really thought of the world and all of him. So I suppose he was probably one of the main reasons, he and Fred Bryant, that I stayed as long as I did. But I found it a very interesting and challenging job, and particularly meeting all the different members that I found be of interest and help to me. So it was a great way for me to be retired and yet be active and have an interest in life. As a result of my many years of service, I was very honored to receive in sequence the 33rd degree in 1995. I was very grateful to receive the 33rd degree after having received the Knight of the Cross of Honor in due time, and then I got the 33rd, and then I was very much surprised and very gratified to receive the honor of the Court of Honor, which is given by the Supreme Council in Washington, D.C. to members who are 33rd degrees and have given exceptional service to the Scottish Rite. I had no idea that honor was coming to me, but as a result, I'm sure of my service as Secretary of the Valley, I was brought to the attention of the Supreme Council, and they did make that award back in 2021, I believe it was. So it's an organization where members that are 33rd degrees are given an additional honor of being in the Court of Honor, which is limited by the Supreme Council to an exceptional few. It was something I had not expected, but very much appreciate. One of the fields of Freemasonry that I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of and having some responsibility in was the York Rite. A lot of people choose which rite they want to belong to, either the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. But membership is available in both for a Blue Lodge Mason in good standing. So one day I was riding in a car going to some activity that was being held up in eastern Kentucky by the Scottish Rite. And in the car was a member of the Scottish Rite, Nolan Rose, who was a 33rd degree and whom I admired and thought a lot of. And he was talking about how people in northern Kentucky should take the Scottish Rite more seriously, particularly running for office. And he made a point that it should be something that we were working toward, as well as the Scottish Rite. I took his thoughts to heart, and I decided that at the next grand session of the York Rite, which was held in Louisville, that I would put my name up for the line in this York Rite, and which leads, after several years, to the office of Grand High Priest. The York Rite is exceptional in that the High Priest is the highest office for the state and in the chapter. So I was elected to the bottom of the line. I served throughout the state and tried to be a faithful and active member of the York Rite as well. And it was my duty and honor and privilege to be elected later then in 1994 to the office of Grand High Priest for the Grand Royal Arch chapter in Kentucky. I served for a year, one of the most rewarding years of my life. My wife was also very much involved with it. We would travel to every state adjoining Kentucky except West Virginia. I had a conflict there. I couldn't make it. But that was the only state I missed, and we had a wonderful time, as well as trying to do something to help in the York Rite. So it's been really a wonderful thing for me, an experience that I've always treasured. I think I can say without hesitation that the most interesting and enjoyable part of Freemasonry to me has been the people that I've met. I've met some outstanding people. I won't try to name any names, but I could recite in the hundreds if I had time to think about it. People that have been an inspiration and a real challenge to me. It's true not only in the Scottish Rite, but in the Blue Lodge, in the York Rite, and in the Order of the Eastern Star. I was very privileged to be the patron, not the grand, but the patron, now past patron of the chapter, Rosebud chapter of the Order of the Eastern Star, and the ladies and their dedication and their help to the Blue Lodge has been outstanding. So I think I can say that it's the people that have really inspired me to do whatever things I was able to accomplish. Because you become a member of people who think like you in that they're dedicated to being a better person. I think it's helpful to everyone to be challenged by the principles of the Lodge and to know that this is true not only now, but it has a historic foundation of hundreds of years that it has appealed to and been a part of the members that have made it a personal challenge to measure up to the principles of the lodge. I think it's very important for a man, if he wants fellowship and brotherhood, to be a member of something. But I find no better challenge and no better companions than being involved in the Masonic fraternity. My wife was a real steadfast and understanding person. She was helpful to me not only in the move that I made in my career, but also in my Masonic endeavors. She inquired of me when I came home from Louisville and announced that I was now in the line of the Yorkite Grand Chapter. And she said, as I recall, what does that mean as far as my obligations? What responsibilities will I have? I assured her that there would be nothing major that she would have to do. However, later I learned that she was going to be in charge of the hospitality room at the Grand Session, and that she would be in charge of the ladies' luncheon at the Grand reception at the Grand Session. And there were several duties that she had during the year that she had not planned on. However, she was a real trooper, and she responded magnificently and had a wonderful program. She was a very good musician. She was a church organist as well as a piano player, so she built her program around her music, and it was very well received. She did a beautiful job for me, and I certainly stand in awe and appreciation of everything she did during our 60 years of marriage. My family consisted of my wife, Verna Lentz Vardiman. We were married in Louisville in 1956, September of 1956. And we had two children, two very nice, wonderful kids. The first daughter was a daughter, Martha, that we named her. And then later, 3 years later, we welcomed a son into our family. And we were very fortunate to have such wonderful, good kids. They really were a blessing to us in so many ways. I would like to show you my biography that I wrote personally about my life. It's nothing outstanding, but to me it was something I wanted to make a copy of for my descendants primarily. I recognize my ancestors as well as I know of them, but I also wanted to leave this as a record for my family. As I explain in the book, I was challenged to do this by a member of our church who was acting as pastor at the time, and he pointed out how valuable such a copy of your memoirs can be. So I undertook this, and with my trusty computer, I managed to type about 100 pages, including some photographs. This picture that you see is of me when I was 10 years old, living in the country with my straw hat and my bib overalls. And that's the way I dressed, and that's the way I was raised on a farm. So I'll always be grateful for that experience. Well, first of all, I said it was more difficult and more time-consuming than I had planned. But I stayed with it, and people gave me a lot of help. Then second, I've expressed much good fortune and happiness with the seasoning of bad luck and sorrow. That my life was not always happy, but it helped me be a rounded person. And third, I have been most fortunate in finding my wife. She was a great companion during my life, and I miss her terribly. But she died 7 years ago, approximately, of cancer. And we had a wonderful life together and 2 fine kids. And fourth, I've tried my best to be an honorable, upright, and reputable citizen of my country, which I've respected very much. I believe the ideals and principles on which it was founded. And fifth, I admit I've been most fortunate in my relationships with my children. So those were the things that I found of interest and help in my life.